Today we're exploring the brain, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. We're looking at its failures, its strangest glitches,
That's right. We're using excerpts from V.S. Ramachandran's work, Phantoms in the Brain, as our guide.
and the mission here is to understand the normal mind by studying these, well, neurological oddities, right?
Exactly. It's what the source calls experimental epistemology. Basically, how does the brain know things? How does it build our sense of reality, our sense of self?
And sometimes the most direct path to understanding that is looking at where it all goes wrong.
Precisely. The authors have this great philosophy. Find the absolute strangest thing you can and dig into it. You don't always need, the billion-dollar lab.
It reminds me of those classic science stories,
Yeah.
like Galileo.
Right. He used what was essentially a toy telescope, looked at Jupiter, saw moons, and bam! Centuries of complex, Earth-centered astronomy overturned. Simple observation.
Or think about ulcers. For decades, everyone knew it was stress.
Yeah.
Expensive therapies, complex diets.
Until Dr. Bill Marshall just looked under a microscope, saw bacteria, H. pylori. A simple, direct observation completely changed medicine.
So that's the spirit here. Simple tools, careful observation, and maybe some necessary speculation.
Definitely speculation, but that's crucial at the edge of knowledge. Peter Medawar said something like, false facts are bad, but false hypotheses, they actually help. They close off wrong paths.
Okay, so we're going to be pushing some boundaries today.
We are. Let's start with maybe the most famous phantom, the phantom limb.
Ah, yes. Silas Weir Mitchell called them sensory ghosts back in the Civil War. Feeling a limb, sometimes painfully, that just isn't there anymore.
It's incredibly vivid, and it tells us immediately that the brain's body map isn't just passively receiving input, it's actively constructive.
So we need to talk about that map. Penfield's homunculus, the little man in the cortex.
That's the one, and it's weird. It's not proportional at all.
Right, it's distorted, massive hands, massive lips, because they have so many nerve endings. And it's upside down.
Upside down, feet at the top. But the really key thing for phantom limbs is the adjacencies. The face area is right next to the hand area.
Not next to the neck where you'd sort of expect it anatomically.
Exactly. And as a side note, the genitals are mapped right next to the feet, which is one speculative reason for foot fetishes, that close neural wiring.
Okay, that proximity is interesting. But phantom limb suggests something more dynamic.
Oh.
Does this map change? Can it reorganize itself in adults? We used to think the brain was pretty much fixed after childhood.
That whole idea is out the window now. Adult brain plasticity is huge. There was a key study by Tim Pons on monkeys. They cut the sensory nerves from one arm.
Okay, so the arm cortex wasn't getting any input.
For 11 years. Then they touched the monkey's face. And the brain scan lit up. Where? In the cortex that used to represent the now missing hand.
Wow. So the face area essentially took over the unused real estate.
It invaded it. And we see this in humans, too, using MEG scans, magnetoencephalography.
That measures brain activity in real time.
Yeah, with great precision. And in amputees, you can see it clearly. Touching their face or their upper arm activates the cortical area that used to belong to the missing hand. The brain just repurposes the space.
And this isn't just theoretical. There are patients who experience this directly.
Yeah.
Like Tom, the patient who felt water on his face.
And simultaneously felt it trickling down his phantom arm. That's the remapping made conscious, the face input being misinterpreted by the newly acquired hand cortex.
That's incredible. And understanding that plasticity actually led to treatments, right? Like mirror box therapy.
Exactly. Using visual feedback to trick the brain into unclenching a painfully cramped phantom hand. Studying the breakdown points the way to fixing it.
Okay, let's shift from the phantom body part to maybe the phantom self. Let's talk about denial, specifically anosognosia.
Ah, yes. The denial of paralysis. Typically after damage to the right side of the brain, causing left side paralysis.
And it's profound denial, isn't it? Not just wishful thinking.
Oh, it's absolute. Patients like Mrs. Dodds would insist her paralyzed left arm was perfectly fine, maybe even confabulate, make up a story about how it just moved, touch the doctor's nose, even while it's lying completely still.
But why? Why does this happen almost exclusively with right hemisphere damage? If the left hemisphere is damaged, causing right side paralysis, patients usually know it. They're often quite distressed.
This is where it gets really fundamental about how the self is constructed. The two hemispheres seem to have different coping mechanisms, let's say.
Okay.
The left hemisphere, the one dominant for language and logic in most people, acts like the general. Its job is to create a coherent story, a stable narrative of the self and the world. It wants consistency.
And to maintain that consistency.
It uses classic defenses: denial, repression, confabulation. Anything that doesn't fit the ongoing story, it just smooths it over, ignores it, or explains it away.
Okay, the left is the storyteller, the spin doctor. What about the RF?
The right hemisphere is more like the devil's advocate. It's constantly checking the big picture, looking for inconsistencies, discrepancies between the story and reality. It's the anomaly detector,
So with anosognosia, the stroke damages the right hemisphere.
effectively silencing the devil's advocate. So the left hemisphere, the general, is free to just deny the massive anomaly, the paralysis, because there's nothing pushing back and saying, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. The consistent story, I'm whole and fine, is maintained despite the overwhelming evidence.
That raises the question, though, is the knowledge of the paralysis completely gone, or is it just inaccessible? Is the general actively blocking it?
There's a fascinating experiment that suggests it's being blocked, the cold water test.
You mean irrigating the ear canal with cold water, that
Yeah.
vestibular stimulation thing?
Exactly. It temporarily disrupts part of the brainstem, but crucially, it seems to also temporarily wake up the damaged right hemisphere in some of these patients.
And what happened when they did this to Mrs. Mackin, the patient with anosognosia?
The denial vanished instantly. She looked at her paralyzed arm and said something like, "Oh, doctor, it's paralyzed. I don't know why I was telling you otherwise." She acknowledged the paralysis and her previous denial.
Whoa.
But here's the kicker. When the cold water effect wore off, maybe a few minutes later,
The denial came back.
completely. And not only did she deny the paralysis again, she denied ever having admitted it just minutes before, denying the denial.
So the information was there all along, just actively suppressed by the left hemisphere's need for a coherent story.
It seems so. The story-making machine prioritized narrative consistency over acknowledging physical reality.
Okay, if the brain goes to such lengths to maintain a story, what happens when the conflict isn't physical reality versus the story, but internal signals, like recognition versus emotion,
Now you're leading us into Capgras syndrome, the imposter delusion.
where someone recognizes a loved one, say their mother, but is utterly convinced she's an imposter, a perfect double?
Precisely. Take patient Arthur. He could describe his parents perfectly, knew all their features, but he insisted they weren't the real ones, just duplicates.
Why that incredibly specific, bizarre delusion? Why not just say, you look like my mother, but I don't feel that connection?
Because the brain needs an explanation. It tries to make sense of conflicting data. In Capgras, the damage seems to be a disconnection. The visual recognition part of the brain, identifying faces, is working fine.
Okay, so that's mom's face signal is generated.
Right. But the connection from there to the emotional centers, the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, is cut.
The amygdala gives us that warm glow of familiarity, that emotional tag.
Exactly. That immediate subconscious feeling of, yes, this is someone significant, someone I know intimately. Arthur wasn't getting that emotional signal, so his brain had two pieces of data. One, this looks exactly like mom. Two, I feel absolutely zero emotional resonance, zero familiarity.
And the imposter theory is the left hemisphere's attempt to reconcile those contradictory facts.
It's the most logical narrative explanation it can construct. If she looks like mom but doesn't feel like mom, she must not be mom. And they tested this physiologically, too.
Oh.
With galvanic skin response, GSR. Measuring tiny changes in palm sweating, which reflects subconscious emotional arousal.
Okay.
When most people see a picture of their parent, their GSR jumps slightly, a subconscious emotional reaction. When Arthur looked at pictures of his parents, his GSR was flat, same as looking at a stranger. Intellectually, he recognized them, but emotionally, nothing. The delusion was the brain story to explain that missing feeling.
It really shows how consciousness is sort of layered, trying to make sense of signals from different specialized parts of the brain.
Which brings us nicely to another example of that separation: blindsight, the zombie in the brain idea.
This is where someone is cortically blind, their conscious visual brain is damaged, but they can still interact with objects visually.
Yes, patient Diane, for instance. Reports seeing nothing, total blackness. Yet, if you hold up a pencil and ask her to grab it,
She can just reach out and grab it accurately.
perfectly. Or, even more strikingly, hold a letter and ask her to post it into a mail slot. She can orient the letter exactly right, vertical or horizontal, to match the slot, and slide it in smoothly, all while insisting she can't see the slot or the letter.
How is that possible?
It revealed that vision isn't one thing. There are at least two major pathways. The what pathway, running to the temporal lobes, is for conscious recognition identifying objects. That was damaged in Diane.
Okay.
But the how pathway, an older system running to the parietal lobes, guides actions unconsciously. It handles the spatial information needed to interact with the world. That was intact.
So her conscious self was blind, but her unconscious action system could still see and guide her movements.
Exactly. The conscious you is just one part of the operation. There's a lot happening under the hood, a kind of functional zombie system handling things.
Let's flip that. We've seen how brain damage reveals these separate systems. What about the mind's power to influence the body when it's fully committed to a belief, even a false one?
Pseudosciesis. False pregnancy. This is maybe one of the most dramatic examples of mind over matter.
The symptoms are physical, right? Not just imagined.
Completely physical and indistinguishable from actual pregnancy. Women who intensely desire or sometimes intensely fear being pregnant develop abdominal swelling, breast enlargement and tenderness, cessation of periods, even morning sickness and labor pains.
But there's no fetus. How does the mind actually cause those physical changes?
It seems to be a combination of powerful hormonal effects driven by belief and emotion and unconscious physical actions. For instance, intense belief or stress can elevate prolactin levels.
Which can suppress ovulation and stop menstruation.
Right. And the abdominal swelling. Often it's due to unconsciously retaining intestinal gas, changing posture, tensing abdominal muscles. The body physically conforms to the mental state.
The brain is literally sculpting the body to match the narrative.
Absolutely. There's the incredible case of Mary Knight. She presented with a hugely swollen abdomen, convinced she was pregnant. The doctors eventually convinced her she wasn't, using ultrasound perhaps.
And her abdomen went down.
Instantly, apparently. Deflated. But then she went home, thought about it, came back, convinced the doctor had missed something. She insisted he'd forgotten to deliver the twin, and her abdomen swelled right back up again.
That's astounding. The power of that belief to directly command physiological changes.
It really is.
So let's try and tie some of this together. We've seen phantom limbs showing body image as a construct. Anosognosia showing the self-narrative can override reality. Capgras and blindsight showing these specialized, separated circuits for emotion, recognition, action.
It paints a picture of the mind and the self as something actively built moment to moment by these different brain processes. Which brings us back to that core question. What is this conscious experience? What defines that subjective feeling, the qualia, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain?
Is there a neurological signature for qualia based on these studies?
Well, Ramachandran proposes two criteria that seem necessary for a neural event to become a conscious quale based on these kinds of observations.
Okay, what are they?
First, irrevocability. Once the specialized circuit processes the input and creates the perception, you, the conscious self, cannot arbitrarily change it. It's delivered as a fixed fact.
Like seeing the Dalmatian in that famous spotted image. Once you see it, you can't not see it.
Exactly. Or the brain filling in your blind spot, you perceive a continuous visual field, you can't choose to see the gap. Or Arthur in Capgras, he couldn't choose to feel familiarity for his parents. The lack of feeling was an irrevocable input to his conscious awareness.
Okay, so the input side is fixed, undeniable. What's the second criterion?
Choice or flexibility on the output side. The perception, once generated, must allow for a potentially infinite range of behavioral responses or associations. It shouldn't trigger just one fixed, stereotyped action like a simple reflex.
So seeing the color yellow doesn't force one action. It opens up possibilities.
Precisely. You can think about bananas or jaundice or yield signs or feel happy or write a poem about it. There's this open-endedness, this freedom of association and action that comes after the irrevocable perception.
Irrevocable input, flexible output. That's the proposed signature of consciousness.
That's the idea emerging from studying these breakdowns. A conscious experience is something presented to you as undeniably real, but which then gives you options.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If conscious experience requires this combination, fixed perception plus flexible response, could free will not just be some abstract philosophical idea,
but actually a functional property, a necessary computational style of these specific brain circuits that generate qualia? Is the feeling of having choice intrinsically linked to the way these circuits operate?
Something to ponder. That's all for this deep dive. Join us next time as we continue to explore.